Welcome, Bulldogs, to Unit 3, COVID Exam Review for American History I. From 1763, the end of the French and Indian War, to 1789, the ratification of the Constitution. Let's get started. All right, not hitting all the points, that's for sure. Just some highlights. Let's start with the first piece of legislation to begin the end of salutary neglect. The British left us alone, but all of a sudden they got to start paying for the war that they just won over the French. So they will have the proclamation of 1763. They will draw this proclamation line saying no Americans can settle west of the line. We're giving that to the Indians. Now, I don't know if you remember from the last video, but the reason the Virginians and the rest of America fought the French and Indian War in the first place was to get that land. It was rich Ohio Valley land. They wanted it. George Washington starts a world war by going after it. And now they win. Woohoo! Let's celebrate. And say, no, you can't have what you fought for. What? Obviously, the Americans not too thrilled about this, but there's a reason. The British, now that they're heavily in debt from the war, can't afford to have a whole bunch of soldiers here protecting settlers from the Indians. And that's why they have this. And here we have the beginning of the end of salutary neglect. Here you can see all this land they were going to give the Native Americans so that they didn't have to patrol it. That's everything they gained from France. So how did the end of salutary neglect lead to the American Revolution? Taxes, baby. No taxation without representation. And here's the beginning. Now, this isn't exactly a tax, but it is taking away the opportunity of land, which would be money. And the Americans really don't revolt too much because they know, what a joke. We're just going to blow it off, and they'll just keep redrawing the line. And they were right. They did. They kept redrawing the line. Okay, but you better not cross this line. Okay, but you better not cross this line. So over that land is where this starts. So salutary neglect, where the British left the Americans alone, didn't really enforce the laws. Them days are over, baby. Quote from the British Prime Minister George Grenville: "You want our protection? We want obedience." Doesn't that sound like they're treating them like kids and not equal citizens? So here's the timeline. We had the Albany Conference, Fort Necessity, where George Washington starts the war. Secretary William Pitt, turning point of the war, happening on the Plains of Abraham and the defeat of Quebec. Treaty of Paris ending the war. We had the proclamation line. And now sugar, stamp, Townsend, quartering, tea acts. Oh my God, look at all those acts. Let's find out what starts the revolution. Debt doubles, and they need money. And how about them colonists? Let's tax them. They were paying a lot less than the average British citizen. So after 1763, their colonial policy won't just make one group of Americans mad. It'll get everybody angry. The next act would be the Sugar Act. The Sugar Act. The Sugar Act. Are you kidding me? It's not going to work. The Sugar Act. The Sugar Act. It worked earlier. Yeah, it's not working. Well, the Sugar Act, trying to get them to stop smuggling, they will lower the act so that they won't bother trying to smuggle and they'll just pay it. They don't know Americans very well. Its purpose was to raise money, though. But it didn't affect a lot of Americans. The Stamp Act does. It affects everybody. And boy, they're not happy. Stamp Act placed a tax on legal papers, diplomas, license playing cards, newspapers, all kinds of stuff. Anytime you touched a piece of paper, you were getting taxed. It was ridiculous. It couldn't be ignored like the sugar tax. And if you violated it, you didn't get a jury trial. You went to military court, baby. Famous Patrick Henry from Virginia says, "If this be treason, make the most of it." They're mad, man. They're mad. They refuse to pay it, and they boycott. Matter of fact, if you try to enforce it, as a British tax collector, you might find yourself tarred and feathered. Angry mobs would go after these tax collectors, and these mobs would evolve into what we know as the Sons of Liberty. All right. So I'm not going to go over the course of acts. I'm not going to go over the T-Acts, the Boston Massacre. Don't have time. You study them. Now let's go to the Revolution. What starts the Revolution? Battles of Lexington and Concord. Lexington and Concord, Boston, Massachusetts, about 14 miles outside is Concord. General Gage orders the seizure of Hancock and Sam Adams and a whole bunch of weapons they've been storing up. And he marches his men out there. A guy named Paul Revere will warn the people that the British are coming. The British are coming. They march on Lexington, and a bunch of farmers stand against British soldiers. Crazy, man, crazy. They're ordered to disperse, ye rebels. They don't. 8 are dead, 10 wounded. This is known as the shot heard round the world. Sam Adams, wanting this revolution, pushing all the buttons, Tea Party, all this stuff he's been pushing. Finally, it's coming to fruition. Quote, "This is a glorious day for America." General Gage marches on Concord now, a town just a few miles down the road. This isn't going to go so well for the British. See, Americans don't fight like the British. We're not going to stand out in the middle of a field, go head to head with you. Heck no. We're going to fight like the Indians. Get behind trees, get behind rocks, and take shots at you. Boy, it's a long march back for the British back to Boston. 16 miles on the way back to Boston, and it was a constant battle. So, okay, fine. Why does this have worldwide implications? Why is it the shot heard around the world? Are Americans that big-headed? Are we that conceited? Well, no. Because of that, everybody in the world is going to be looking at France, who gets this idea, hey, look what the Americans did. We can overthrow the king? Really? That's never happened before. Yeah, I know, but Americans did it? Good God. Backwoods redneck farmers can do it. We can do it too. Vive la Revolution! Bunkers Hill's next. Technically a British win, but when you look at the casualties down here, it's hard to call it a British win. Matter of fact, quote, a British general will say, "A dear bought victory. Another such would have ruined us." And those people show a spirit and conduct against us that they never showed against the French. Gage is forced to leave Boston. So the Americans are actually showing some muscle here. Things don't go too well after that. People starting to think about quitting. And then a little old pamphlet. Yeah, I know, a pamphlet changes everything. My God, it's a close call. Should Thomas Paine go on Mount Rushmore? It's a close call. It's a close call. But because of his pamphlets, the army stays together. He and George Washington keep the hope alive. They win the revolution. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. And they have a new government called the Articles of Confederation, a.k.a. crap. What an awful form of government. So here's the big idea. Remember this for the exam. They got no power, man. No power. None whatsoever. Can't tax. Well, if you can't tax, what can the government do? Can't enforce laws. What? Can't regulate trade. This is crazy. Who made this government? Gumby? Now, one thing that they do well is determine the fate of Western lands, including slavery. So here's a big thing. Looking forward to the next units. Wow. The federal government sets a precedent that we can determine slavery in new territories. Like Kansas-Nebraska Act, Compromise of 1850, Missouri Compromise. So here, if you look at the strengths, it's got two strengths, the Land Ordinance and the Northwest Ordinance. Ladies and gentlemen, study the Northwest Ordinance. Study the Northwest Ordinance. Study the Northwest Ordinance. Why is he telling us to study the Northwest Ordinance? Study the Northwest Ordinance. Its weaknesses, well, there's just a few. Yeah. Okay? So the Northwest Ordinance. What? Look it up on YouTube yourself. All right, the Constitution and Compromise, otherwise known as the Dark Bargain. This is where you find slavery legalized in the Constitution. The big idea here, it's all about the power, baby. And where does power come from? Representation. The more representatives you have, the more power your state has. So the more people counted means the more representatives you have. The more representatives you have, the more power your state has. So how can we get more people counted? Count our slaves, count our slaves. They shouldn't count, they can't vote. Count them, don't. Count them, don't. Fight, fight, fight. Well, screw it, man. I'm leaving. We're no Constitution. So there's got to be a compromise. So the southern states, you can see what they wanted. They didn't want their slaves counted for taxing, but they do want them counted for representation. The North wants the exact opposite. So what they do is they come to a compromise. Each slave would be counted as 3/5 of a person. I know, it just hurts just saying that, right? What are they thinking? But anyways, the 3/5 compromise, the one big mistake within the Constitution. All right. So the other compromise we'll talk about is the Great Compromise. And what we get is the Virginia plan, all about representation, all about power. They say, hey, say we should do it by representation. So Virginia would get like 100 votes, and Rhode Island would get 2. So the small states say, screw you, Virginia, we're not doing it. And they come up with their own plan. The New Jersey plan. 1 state, 1 vote. And Virginia says, what are you, crazy? Our million people get the same vote as like 2 people in Rhode Island? Heck no. Fight, fight, fight. We got to have a compromise or else we won't have a Constitution. And thus, the New Jersey plan, Virginia plan, peanut butter, chocolate, put them together and you get something even better, a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. And this is going to be known as the Great Compromise. So that's where we get our Congress today. 2 houses. One, basically, the Virginia plan, the House of Representatives. One, basically, the New Jersey plan, the Senate. So, and you can see representation being the big thing that the 3/5 compromise would address. All right, that's the end of our notes today. I'll see you again for Unit 4, COVID Exam Review.